Hi, and welcome to this week's News from the Real World podcast. I'm Jeremy. I am a second-year grad in technical direction.
I'm Jessica. I'm a second-year costume grad.
I'm John. I'm a lighting designer.
I'm Allie. I'm a second-year stage manager, production manager.
What year are you?
I'm supposed to do that now?
Yeah, you're supposed to tell them what year you are.
I'm a second-year grad.
Yay!
There you go. Yay! We're all
All right.
Had a few weeks. It's so
I've never done
John is finally back with us for a
Yes.
week after taking a few days off. And we're back. And so we're looking at 10 articles this week that have been commented on at various stages from the News from the Real World blog page.
Our first one up. Yeah, our first one up is about the Harry Potter parody, which is called Puffs. Because it goes after the Hufflepuffs. And I'm pretty sure if we're not careful, we'll talk about this like all the time. Because it's Harry Potter,
We'll
we love
count
it.
the whole thing at 45 minutes.
Yeah. It'll all be about Harry Potter.
Yeah,
It's beautiful. The big thing about it, though, is it's about streaming online, and while it's still out there, and while it's not the first one to have done it, it's how widespread it is, and how openly available it is, and that it's still out and running. Like, they didn't end it and then finally produce it out. They're doing it while it's still going, which means they're trying to make it more available for everyone.
So you're telling me I can go ahead and stream this in my free time?
That's pretty much when it comes out, when it streams. It's supposed to be on the 22nd of November. You can just go stream it.
Okay, great.
That's the idea behind
So
it.
they're going to be making profit streaming it while they're also still having live performances.
Yeah,
which is not traditional in any sense.
And it's happened one other time, but this is much more open and like available, especially since they're doing streaming services.
Harry Potter will change the world.
I just love it because it's about Hufflepuffs.
Are you guys Hufflepuff?
Okay. No.
What are you?
Oh, that's a lie.
Can we go around the table and
You're
say what are you
totally
guys?
No,
okay.
I'm a,
What are you? You're Thunderbird?
yeah, I'm part of the.
Thunderbirds are go.
What?
Anyways.
John.
No, this is serious.
We need to know what each
Houses.
person's house is.
I have no idea. I've never.
Are you
I'm
are
from
you kidding?
America, so I'm at the American school.
Oh, that's
Sorry.
it. That's
Why?
it.
My favorite is the name of Puffs, or 7 increasingly eventful years at a certain school of magic and magic, which I love because I feel like that's how grad school is.
Yeah.
3 years at an
Aw.
increasingly eventful and stressful school of
Magic.
drama and things.
Dude, you're totally a Hufflepuff. You bake cookies. You are a
Yeah,
Hufflepuff.
you're a
Like,
Hufflepuff.
come on.
Anyways.
From one Hufflepuff to another. Okay, what are you?
Oh, I'm a Slytherin with a Ravenclaw twist, apparently. So, yeah, it's a long story, but I took the Pottermore quiz, and then I said I wanted glory instead of whatever, which I was told was a very Slytherin response. It's fine. I get it. But I'm also Ravenclaw and Gryffindor.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm,
How can it be multiple houses? At least I picked
because
a
they
house.
have multiple personalities.
Oh my God.
This
This is
I
an
have no
episode.
idea.
This is the movie
Do
split.
you not know what you are?
I'm just so
Anyways.
I feel like
How do you know? I do not
No, it's
know.
not.
Yes, it
We're
is.
so far.
I feel like you're Ravenclaw.
This is
Anyway,
important. Oh, yeah.
It's like
that's
a
good,
Slytherin
that's good.
twist.
She's just like I profiled you.
Anyways, moving on to our next
It's
article,
like
because
I'm
obviously this is not
Pottermore.
going very well.
What are you talking about? That was the best conversation ever. All right. Okay. So article number 2 is a look at the masks and the puppets in the Lion King's puppet shop from stagedirections.com. And thank you for assigning this to me because I really love Adam Savage. I don't know.
And it's a video link.
It is a video link, so I also appreciate that. Thank you. It was like 20 minutes long, but I did watch it almost twice way through.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, see, almost once.
Yeah,
through.
almost
You gotta finish
almost
one.
all the way through. We're just playing fast and loose
2
today.
minutes into it.
But yeah, so it was Adam Savage, and he was visiting the person who basically maintains all the masks for the Lion King, and it's been around for what, like 21 years?
21 years.
Which
Anniversary
is
this year.
crazy.
So do they manage just the mask for the Broadway show, or do
It's
they do
for
the
the
other show?
tour.
The tour?
It's for the tour,
Yeah.
right?
Th-
Tour.
This film was primarily looking at the creation and maintenance for on the tour itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, the maintenance in general like heads towards like everything that
Yeah.
goes into puppetry and stuff like that. But I love it because Adam Savage was a puppet, a props master at one point. He's very creative. He loves costumes. He goes cosplays, like all Comic Con stuff like that. If you're not an Adam Savage fan, like watch Mythbusters and get a life. But yeah, so it's actually really cool. Like watch it. It's really neat. What I find fascinating is learning about the road boxes that are packed with all of the tools and the supplies, and because it's not just like, oh, let's take it and then like maybe
You
bring
have to
some
have
paint
a-
with us.
It's a mobile shop to repair.
It's an army, and you know we went and saw Brian and Hugh brought us backstage to see the Aladdin tour that was just recently here, and looking at the road boxes as well, just like what goes into the maintenance. It's like constantly blows my mind what happens behind the scenes. So that was really cool. So if you're interested in that, just watch it. It's good 20 minutes.
There's one thing about touring that a lot of people I think forget about until you are on a tour, and that's you have to think of okay, we need this. If this happens, that means we need this, this, and this. Sometimes there's not always a Home Depot open,
Oh
or
my God,
Lowe's, or a
stress.
Joann
Yeah,
Fabrics,
totally.
or a Hobby Lobby. That,
2 in the morning.
you know, like the place, you know, the town might not have that, so you have to pack for all those worst case scenarios. You have to have enough raw materials with you to do small repairs and the tools to.
Because you certainly don't have time to like, oh, let me order this and have it delivered to the next place, and then that's.
Oh, I need a
nightmare.
leather punch.
Yeah, exactly. So and then it's like having multiple tools in case something breaks
Yep.
on that front, and like being able to repair things multiple times. But they are really cool. Like, I mean, I've seen The Lion King. I don't know if anyone else has.
I
but
saw
like,
it in Vegas. They're
it's
amazing. to mass.
incredible, and like the movement, and even talking about like the giraffes, and like only weighs 2 pounds. But if you imagine like wearing that on your head, like how strong your neck shoulder muscles got to be. But it's really cool, and like some of the stuff too is also very dated, also because it's like 21 years ago. So they're using like clamps that you used to have on your shoes to tighten your shoes, but now they use them on your head. But like sort of some of the techniques have evolved, which is pretty cool to see.
It's the
where
active
we've
improvements
been.
throughout the tour life. 'Cause
Yeah.
There's one thing about tour life is that it evolves the way you do things. You might set out with a package. This is the tour package,
Mhm.
but that package will never return back the same way because not due to damage, but just due to the things have a life of their own and find out. Oh well, this person really needs this help with this, so they were going to do it slightly differently, or you know, we found this better replacement for this part.
Or they no longer make it,
Yeah.
so we have to adjust. Like, it's very cool. I highly recommend the video.
Oh, nice. Well, going off of Broadway, I should have done it with a grand gesture.
No.
Broadway.
You have such a great voice too, so sing it.
So this is industry editor exclusive on Broadway World, a paperless Broadway technology in the rehearsal room by Kara Joy David, and basically discusses how director choreographer Jeff Whitting and choreographer director Susan Stroman designed a piece of technology for the rehearsal room that limits the use of paper.
Reduces the
Reduces the not limits,
Yeah.
reduces the use of paper. It's okay. I have so many feelings about
Okay, do
this.
tell.
So she even talks about how now her ASMs and stage managers are using this to preserve the original artistic intention of the movement, blocking, and overall creative plan. I actually thought I was going to hate this more from a stage management perspective, and I actually like it more than I thought because there are so many times that directors will go through the blocking for a scene, and you will write it down, and then
frantic
it'll
erasing
change.
that happens afterwards.
And then it erases, and then and then they do it again, and then it erases, and so, but which is not an issue because it's fine, that's your job, just do it. The issue comes in when they then go, wait, isn't that what we did 2 times ago?
Oh,
wait,
no.
what did we do? And you're like, and without wasting
I never
90
thought of that.
pages every
Yeah.
single time.
You just go back to a different version.
Right, and sometimes, like this summer, we solved that by having multiple blocking sheets per 1 page of script.
Okay.
Which is
Cool.
fine, right? Because then it's like
Until it's settled upon.
until it's settled, and then you know which one. But even and that's obviously less paper than reprinting the entire script.
Yeah.
But in order to reduce all of the paper, I do like this idea because it allows you to make those changes and go back and reference it and like all of that. It's certainly not new. They even mention it in here. It's not a new thought to do books on like iPads and stuff. A lot of Broadway shows do that. Cirque does that.
Also, those places are more established and not in the quick turnaround time frame of, like, say, regional theater.
Right, exactly.
Well, they have the money, I think, also to support the people that need to do their job, like at that high level.
Yeah.
Right. My biggest issue, because I'm like secretly 80 years old, my biggest issue
What?
is surprise. That's what I'm gonna be next year or next week for Halloween. 80-year-old woman.
Myself.
Right, I'll just log in.
Yeah.
Just log in. No, my biggest issue is that if it crashes,
I know, it's like a Kindle.
if it crashes in the middle of a show and you're like,
It's having
Yeah,
redundancies.
well,
Save it on the cloud.
what you gotta do.
honestly, for me, I think this is a great tool for iterations and reiterative
Yes.
things during the process.
Mhm.
And it's great for the directors to visualize and integrate, and a little bit helps their workflow, I think, because it helps instantaneously sync everyone in the room to the same reality. Now, moving
And
forward
outside
to
of
a
the room,
run,
They talked about how the costume designer in New York can see what's going on if you
Correct.
change the setting.
But everyone that's currently working on it, it syncs everyone together at the same time.
Yeah.
But then during a show run, like calling from something like this versus like having it all printed out in a book that you can then have, I feel a lot more comfortable about.
There's something about having paper.
Mhm.
It feels more comfortable, and I think, I don't know, maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe it's like, I don't, it's the same thing with like costume designers and their Bibles. It's all digital, but like we'll print it out because it's like nice to have it there, and you can easily flip through it really quickly.
It's instantaneous information.
Exactly.
Like there is no downloading speed.
Well, and there's a
it's
big,
just there.
this falls into a category of things of like, what can we do to help green theater? Make our theater less wasteful. And I think the biggest way that we can successfully cut away in paperwork is reducing all the iterations, keeping as many iterations digital as possible. But I don't think there's any way we get away from the final ever being a printed out or finalized physical copy.
At least
Because
for
like,
now.
at least
So
for
we
now.
know.
I mean, because like lighting plots, those
Mhm.
you want those paper, or it's just
Well,
hard to
and-
have a digital iPad running around.
And the thing is, like, you want something paper because you're in situations where something's going to break, and you don't want
You
having
don't
a
want
piece
it
of
to be
paper
your
ripped
source.
instead
Yeah.
of an iPad
Yeah.
shattering. It's
Like
totally different.
carpentry, if you have high impact screens, it gets super expensive really quickly. And then like if you're looking at like scenic artists, they want the actual artwork there, because in order to do color matches and everything, you don't want to match it off of a screen that might not be the same screen that they rendered.
Or you have
Oh,
to
yeah,
pay a
that
lot of
goes
extra
with
money
it.
to then color render the screen properly, which
Yeah.
costs so much more.
Yeah.
So I think there's significant holdbacks for it to fully eliminate paper, just as an overall goal. But I think looking at it as reduction therein, I think it will help.
The only other thing, on the flip side of like, oh my god, it could crash, that fear of mine, when this was last year, we had 2 Cirque stage managers come and do like just a workshop with us, and they showed us their book. And to be honest though, and it makes sense for Cirque, it doesn't make sense for
It's the same show.
whatever. Well, yes, but
And also doing the jumps to other parts.
for Cirque it makes sense because every single thing that happens has a contingency.
Multiple contingency, like
Right. But like based off of what it is that like malfunctions. So if
If it's a person or if it's equipment, and then you can
And if
instantly
you're-
link to jump to a different cue bracket.
And so when you look, it's actually really, really cool. When you look on the page, and they have it printed out too, but like the pro of having it digital is that if you look on the page on the screen on the Kindle, and like if so and so's connection like doesn't lower so that they can fly up in the air, you follow that over, and on a separate page it has literally all of the contingencies.
Oh,
And you
wow.
can just like click on it and it expands, and you know, if this happens, you need to tell so and so to do this, you need to tell so and so to do this, you need to make sure that the operator does this, and like that's cool.
That makes sense, because when you're printing
That's
that out
awesome.
and like giving that interface, like how can you really unpack
Right.
all that
You're
so
just trying to
quickly?
file
Yeah.
through,
It adds a lot of
You're like,
so much
follow
paperwork.
the yellow highlighter. Yeah.
So like in
No.
that
Pages
instance,
open.
but I do think that that is very specialized to those kinds of shows where you have aerials and you have acrobatics and you
Yeah.
have like large pieces of machinery, like
Yeah.
So
and
many
you care to make sure no
elements.
one gets actually work hard and make sure no one gets
Yeah.
harmed.
right, the ability for risk and for like physical injury.
Oh,
is
God.
pretty
Yeah.
high. Oh, I couldn't
Mitigate the mutilation.
Oh,
Anyway.
all I want to do is design.
So
Okay.
yeah, you know,
It's out there.
you want to design for them?
Oh, hell yeah.
Move to Canada.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah, sure, why not? Anyways, this is not about me.
Life crisis.
I mean, I'd like to. It's just so cold. It's already so cold. It's
So you can come visit me.
Okay. Done. We've decided. All right. Moving on to 4.
Yeah.
Why not? Okay, so this is Equity Urges Action after disappointing Willy Wonka casting decision. So it actually took me a minute to truly understand what I was reading. Not gonna lie, yeah. And then I had to read about the LPA, which is the live. Oh gosh, I don't actually know. Sorry, guys. But it's the Live Performance Australia. I think that's what it is. Where they terminated a previous agreement with Equity, saying that I really should have done my homework. Sorry, guys. But anyways, it's there. It's within the article. But they terminated an agreement saying it's something about like, I would say, promoting like Australian actors above any foreign actor coming in. So the issue here in this specific article was about that the lead for Willy Wonka is a non-Australian person. So what this does is that it really does basically like I guess. Let me start again. This is about, it says, when the LPA terminated the old agreement, we were assured it would be business as usual and the floodgates would not yet open. Yet we have seen many examples of Australian performers missing out on major and possibly career-defining musical theater roles. And I think that this has like gray area written all over it because, you know, like I can think of maybe 5 really great Australian actors off the top of my head that came to the US or went to the UK and like have become like very prominent in you know, just like Nicole Kidman and that really Wolverine.
Hugh Jackman.
That guy.
Yeah.
No, guys, it's Wolverine. But basically, it's interesting. I get what Australia's doing, where it's like it's hard because you have a smaller pool, and like why not pull from the local pool and like kind of get your actors and your performance there. Why look outside the pond, really? But at the same time, it's also fluid. So like when people come to the United States, they come to New York or LA to also work. Like it would not really behoove the industry to be like, we're only hiring Americans. Like, so I think there's a lot going on there.
Well, and I think it also ties into not so much with necessarily this Willy Wonka casting, but casting in general that we've been talking about for the past few weeks of cast appropriately above all.
Yeah, and like I mean, it's also one of those things where you're like, oh, is that the better actor? But then like, okay, so we hire an American. Let's just say, for argument's sake, we hired an American. Does that mean that there's no actors in Australia that could have had that role? And I don't think so. So I wonder like what was the choice? And like the rule now, because the LPA got rid of the agreement, is that you can hire anybody as long as you have an Australian on the staff. And that means that Australian could be somebody that works in the office. It doesn't have to be anything about the casting. But then you're wondering, like, why are you casting? Like, what are the casting choices? And what is the production company doing? Like, what are they valuing as far as, is it a name that they're bringing in to sell more tickets? Or are they trying to give somebody a new chance? Or is this a favor for somebody's uncle's nephew? Like, you don't know. So I think that it's very interesting, but I think that in general, casting, I think like, you know, it's hard because you're an actor, you can go anywhere in the world to perform. So those chances and those opportunities should always be open to everybody. So I think that that's a conversation that Equity needs to have and that all these other like industries need to have and create like maybe a universal rule. I don't know. I'm not familiar with what it is in the United States. So
what's also difficult is the vast size of the U.S. I mean, we have so much more theater just because our population's higher. When you think of some of the other countries out there, they just don't have as much theater because there's just not as many people to staff it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's and part of that's also how many schools there are that teach it.
I also think it's like any other industry, it's about supply and demand.
Yeah.
Is there demand for more theater in a community? If there is, then you know, great, you're able to increase and grow in that. But if there's not the need for it,
I know it's
this
like
is
there's
going
so
down a
many
way I
shades
don't
of
really
gray.
want. Yeah, but like, yeah.
Well, it's like with Memoirs of a Geisha. I think it was the main actress was Chinese. Or you know, correct me if I'm wrong, internet. But I think that, and then there was a large problem because they were like, why can't we find I think it was a Japanese actress to play that role? Again, correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that unloaded a lot of issues where we were saying last week of, you know, cast appropriately. But if it's like a role like Willy Wonka, where it's like anybody can play that role, again, back to roles where anybody can play that role. I just wonder what the casting agency, and I think that there's also an issue here too, where it's an outside production company within the United States that was hiring somebody versus coming in Australia and hiring. But I don't know. I would be interested to hear what other people's opinions are on that.
And I think there's a different. Sorry.
Well,
Okay,
I'm just gonna say
sorry,
we
jump in.
started this off as this is a pretty it's the gray area, right?
It's
We talked
super
about
gray
it's a gray area
area.
because it's kind of how do we figure this
Yeah,
out in
like
an appropriate
LA
way
is
for
such a
everyone?
melting pot, and so is like London and New York and like the hot spots for me, like
Because there's
media.
arguments on both sides that are like, how do you then balance and make it so that it's
Yeah,
fair
I
for
mean, if we
everybody?
had these rules in place, then we would never have hijab. Right?
Well, and I think it's interesting. Like
Back
right,
to Wolverine.
Willy Wonka. Oh, I'm about to take it back.
Do
further.
it. Let's hear it.
Like Willy Wonka, like it doesn't have to be a specific person. So I think there's definitely a difference between casting Willy Wonka and casting people in West Side Story who are not appropriate to be in West Side Story.
Correct.
Totally.
It's a
Yeah.
very different thing.
Exactly.
And what I also find interesting is that like casting itself is a very different type of employment, right? So like going back to Canada, fun fact.
Let's do it.
Well, they're such good neighbors. They really are. I looked into for like just like asking for a friend.
Sure, totally.
What would it take to become a stage manager in Canada if a friend wanted to know that? And what this friend found out was that basically you, with the two different equities, Canadian equity and US equity, what you have to do is you basically kind of have to prove that there is no Canadian SM who could possibly do this, who they could hire instead. Like, it is very hard.
It's
to
so
be
much costume
hired.
to like cross permeate.
Yeah.
Like I looked at the UK and it's like, well, you want to build your community because you get hired by the people that you know, and then like just getting a worker's like
Workers
ID,
visa.
all that stuff too. I mean, it kind of works like that too. Like in the business side of like, for example, like in banking, like we're brothers bankers. So like they have to prove like, is there anybody else in this country who cannot do this job that we have to bring this person in on? And so it's interesting how like on the back end of this industry, there's so many more like rules and regulations that you have to kind of, and that I seem a little political as well. Whereas like when you're an actor,
Anything with a country versus another country, it's going to be political.
it's going to be political,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah.
So with acting, it's definitely different.
Yeah, it feels more fluid. So I wonder. I mean, if there are any actors out there that have come up against this, I would be comment in the comment section. I'd love to
Please
hear
do
about it. Yeah, please do it.
Talking
Talk to us.
about hiring
In general.
In
in general, generally hiring, and
What's that job market like?
Whoa, we'll find
Well,
out in a couple years.
I like being an artist.
like maybe living. So what I found honestly the most interesting. I didn't actually even introduce it yet.
It's cool.
Jason Blum's excuse for not hiring women is terrible. Yes,
yeah,
it
what's
is,
this one
Kate
about?
Gardner.
Tell us.
On the Mary Sue, really? On the marysue.com. God, interesting.
Anybody can have a website.
Like, I don't know this
I
platform.
have one.
What I found most interesting, not maybe most, but one of the very interesting
Intriguing
things,
about it,
yes, is that this was not the only article about this week.
Correct.
Oh,
There
okay.
were two others.
What happened?
There are at least two
Oh,
others. Oh,
So
no.
I
basically,
did not read this.
he made a comment.
Essentially saying that
Blumhouse is a studio, right? And
Okay.
so Jason Blum made a comment about how he makes horror movies, a lot of
Okay.
different horror movies, and he said basically that there were no female directors who wanted to make horror,
Blanket statement.
right?
Yeah.
And one of the other articles, and basically he was like, "I'm so sorry." Like he went back and did say like.
He's
Did
like,
an
sorry, I
apology.
got
He was like,
caught.
"I'm sorry, that's not what I
saying
meant."
that. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's going to ruin my public image if I did not say that.
Yeah.
And came out with a
Is
public
the internet
apology.
forever? Oh.
And what I thought was interesting was another one of these articles was like, he apologizes. Isn't it so great? He did it immediately. Like, we should see more people like apologizing immediately. And this article, yes, Kate Gardner. Anyway, she was like, it was a pretty terrible answer.
Yeah.
He just backpedaled. Like,
I also like the article of 10 women who are for film directors.
In case you're looking.
In case you're looking.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So he's worked with some stellar directors, writers, but the upcoming release of Halloween, they asked why none of the directors had been female. He had an answer, a pretty terrible answer. We're always trying for that. We're not trying to do it because of recent events. We've always been trying. He went on to add, there were not a lot of female directors, period, and even less who were inclined to do horror.
How can you say that?
And then the writer, thank God, was like, there are not as many female directors as male directors. That much is true. But to use that as an excuse to not actively court women to direct their films is absurd.
Yep.
It's ridiculous. And like the fact that he did an apology, and so this other article was like, oh, great, he apologized.
Yeah, good for him.
And this is like, no, it was awful.
Yeah. Not letting people off the hook as easily for what they're actually saying is
Just
very important.
Just
Very
because they
important.
apologize doesn't mean that they like. Oh, I was reading you've apologized. You said some words and.
Well, you
great.
can't also crucify one person and then let somebody else off the hook.
It's got to be by their actions from now on out is how you really know if they're really sorry. You're gonna see by their actions from here on out.
True.
I mean, I do think that yes, great. It's good that he apologized, but you still have to examine what he said as like that's an issue that he said it in the first place.
Yeah, totally.
Because then that means that there's that mindset somewhere in the industry,
Right.
or at least in his mind, for that time.
Is indicative of what he actually thinks.
And if that's how he thinks, how hard is he really looking for a female? And then you're just like, shouldn't you be looking for people who like have the same artistic vision as you, and like regardless of gender or whatever, like just those are the people you should be
or
finding,
even the
but,
fact that the diversity of it, or the issue there is, if he did not mean it that way, that means people interpreted it that way, which then still identifies that there's that issue there.
Yeah, right.
So no matter what, it shouldn't have been that.
And he says like, oh, he tried to get this one famous director, like more famous director, to do. She did Babadook, and he tried to get her to work with him, and like she is in demand, so she said no. And it's like, okay, but that's one person.
That's one person.
Like, go look, and also
I'm sure
the
there's
article said like,
yeah.
go look
There's
for
others out
not younger, but like people who
there.
are
Up and
less
coming.
people who are less well known, who like want to do this.
Maybe
want
they'll
to
bring a
work with it.
freshness to the horror film genre as well that like could be fun. Or like honestly, I'd love to actually I'd like to know the list of female like horror genre films and like see what their films are like, and maybe there's a change in perspective because like in almost every horror film it's like, how are women really portrayed? Like it's really pretty awful. And so you're like, oh, okay, like I would love to see a female perspective on that. Maybe we could change it up a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe they wouldn't have the girl always being the one going down the cellar stairs, knowing that
Stupid.
she's
I just spat on you.
You're
I just
fine.
got really excited.
No,
I
it's like,
was like, don't get murdered.
Don't do it. Anyway,
Stupid.
so Jason Blum.
What's on top of that? What one nice thing that's been?
Spat on that.
Can't believe you. Being.
I'm little leave. I'll see myself out.
On a positive note, though, the Directors Guild's reporting, Variety stated about Directors Guild reporting that there has been improvement in diversity in television directing, which is pretty darn awesome.
That was a smooth segue.
Right?
Thank you. I worked very hard on that. The whole time you guys were no.
I was not listening.
anything
It was
we
just like
What were you
about
just been talking
myself.
about? No,
Willy Wonka.
Willy Wonka, genealogist the best. Anyways, it talked about their increases, and it was great because it says, and there's still more increases and more ground regained, but it says it rose to 25% of all episodes was directed by women.
This is on Variety.com.
Yeah, Variety, yeah.
And for episodes in general on television?
Yeah, it just said the percentage of episodes directed by women rose to 25% of all episodes. And then for those of color, it was 24% of all. Directors of color increased 24% of all episodes. African Americans, male and female, directed 13%, which didn't have an increase, but there was increases in all the other areas. Like there's just been some increases in the diversity of who's actually directing television, which is big because there's a lot of episodes out there.
Yeah.
So it should be more diverse on who's directing it, because each episode usually will have a different director or the same group of directors that will go through. Why can't it be diverse?
Well, when I discovered that for television series, I was like, oh, that makes sense because like you can't have one director working like on all of that. And, like, it kind of blew my mind that the series did that. But I do love, like, I know. Okay, I'm gonna bring up Outlander. This is the beginning, and I do apologize. But
I
for
did.
the I think it was like season 1, episode 7, the wedding episode. It was directed by a female, and I think that they were very big about that because it was like a highly sexual content, and it was just like a really sensitive episode. So it's also like I think like promoting that and talking about that is always great too. Because again, it changes your perspective. I think when you watch it, and it's cool to see what their viewpoint. But
I mean, I'm like a lot of articles that have been coming out recently about, oh well, this is increased in this number, this is increased in this number. I'm just waiting for the day where it's not news.
yeah, well, we're not
anymore.
talking about
Like
it anymore.
it's not like, oh, the latest greatest new thing, because it's just common.
It's just the norm.
What was interesting also was the companies that were hiring more diverse people. And the first ones, I'll just read off here. Disney and ABC was at about 50%, 51%.
All right, Disney.
And then Fox, 47, Lionsgate, and CBS were in the 46, 47% range. And then like Paramount, HBO, NBC, Sony, Netflix, Amazon, Warner Brothers, Viacom were all around 30 or less.
Interesting because you,
Some of them they started ranging from there all the way down. But a lot of
And also those are companies that are still like they are established, but they're getting more into they're finding their stride in the producing of things.
But I would have thought that
but-
at
I would
least,
have thought Netflix would
What-
have
HBO.
What's interesting with
like-
Netflix though, I was reading an article on Netflix that wasn't any of these, and Netflix is paying a ton of money to poach as they say, and bring in other directors from other companies. And if they're spending all that money on directors, why aren't they
Recruit
being?
equally.
I mean, if they're paying that much, they can pay to have a more diverse
Yeah.
group directing the shows, which was that one kind of stuck out to me more than others.
Well,
did,
and the one
but-
thing is like, if it wants to be the priority of the company,
Mhm.
it has to be in their vision of what they want to see as their company, and then they will fight for it to happen.
Mhm.
And I'm sure those top competitors like Disney
Yeah.
has made that a priority,
Mhm.
and that's why we see such large
Well,
numbers.
Disney's
as we do.
so corporate too, so
Correct.
they want to make sure they're
And
doing
Disney's
it right.
Disney's probably at the point where like they've also seen the benefits of the perspective in what they produced.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
the stuff that they produced is wide enough range. They're like, we of course want a wide range of people. We produce a wide range of material.
Mhm.
And that company is becoming commonplace.
Mhm.
About producing, Stairway to Heaven is not blurred lines. This is on techdirt.com. And this is about the controversy of Stairway to Heaven and blurred lines copyright infringement possibilities. That has been going on for many, many years at this point.
I feel like
Because it had gone all the way up to the Ninth Circuit Court, and the ruling that wasn't copyright, but then it's being dug back into, and there's two legal frameworks that must be proven of defendant's access to copyrighted work, and then that is actually copying an unlawful appropriation to prove copying.
Wait, can you bring us back and tell us what this is about? The blurred lines.
So
Just
the
remind
one
me.
basically the one song is claiming that the other song is using parts of it.
Oh, this is
So-
back to that blurred line song
Yeah,
that was
Wait,
so popular.
the Blurred Line song
Yeah, but
and the Stairway to Heaven
Which
song.
parts? Why am I not?
I
thinking
I
that
honestly can't sing the real parts or
What?
yeah,
You didn't
I forget the
compare
parts,
with
but
some-
there's parts of the songs that are very similar, and the artists complain that it's one song came before the other and it's stolen from the
well,
other.
that's-
Is what they're saying.
Oh, I love
um,
copyright stuff.
Yeah.
So-
So in the one thing here is that essentially the Ninth Circuit has come up with a statement on this and saying that this inverse ratio this inverse ratio rule attests that assists in only proving copying, not providing unlawful appropriation. Even if the plaintiff proves that the defendant copied his work, the plaintiff must still show that the copying amounts to unlawful appropriation. The showing of substantial similarity necessary to prove unlawful appropriation does not vary with the degree of access the plaintiff has shown. So essentially what that means is this isn't quite over yet. Because the inverse ratio rule is essentially going to mean that is not what caused the court to validate the jury's verdict and send the case down for a second trial. And he says in this article that Rick Sanders that he's going to talk about this more in a later post. But yeah, this is a big old headache of music copyright law, and which is interesting because there's also been some things in the government recently about copyright law with music
They're reviewing it, yeah.
how they've actually pushed through, and it's actually on its way to get fully signed in. So.
Yeah, I find copyright in music especially very interesting. Cause like, here's my thing. If what?
Like how many chords?
Who did Ice Baby?
MC Hammer. No, that's so wrong. I'm so
wrong.
sorry.
Anyway,
Wait, Google it.
If they could get away,
Use an unknown device to search for it.
if they could get away,
Yeah,
with
we're not sponsored by
stealing
Google either.
from
Or
under
MC Hammer.
pressure.
Not until they actually saw it.
And have it be like that blatantly obvious. And like I know that they did a settlement like outside, but like come on.
Well, that's the thing. There has been no settlement of this.
Vanilla
Right.
Ice.
Vanilla Ice.
Oh, it wasn't too
Whatever,
far. I
I'm not a white
said
guy.
Ice Cube. So like
Ice Cube. We're all wow.
okay,
We
I'm
are
just saying, like
we
I
just-
think
Yeah.
Musicians in the room are just like,
I
ugh.
think it's very interesting and like because I honestly I'm playing the songs in my head.
Mhm.
I'm trying to see the overlap and I can't see it.
We'll pull it up and listen to it afterwards, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty interesting that this is still as large of an issue as it is.
Well, it's so
There's
interesting.
a lot of money involved.
Yep.
Not for nothing.
I mean, I was talking about this in like context as far as like design goes, because I remember hearing about this and just being like, okay, well, how many like chords and how many different ways can you put it into a song? And like, okay, if you have like 2 or 3 chords there, like, doesn't it sound similar? And like, there are so many songs out there and stuff. It's like, so with like fashion design, like I think you have to have like 3 to 5 points of change between each thing. So it's like, how many dresses, how many different designs are out there? How many points of change can you do?
Well,
and like everybody copies each other.
And a big thing that this is bringing up is that one person developed a song, another person developed a song, and they never heard each other's song, but the song sounds similar.
Is that what they say?
No,
I feel like you
That's
can't
so-
not know
no,
Stairway to Heaven. I have terrible taste in
the
music.
timing of when they actually came out,
Okay.
it was very similar. So like the like for instance in this article they're
Wait, what?
talking about the framework of the copyright. And the one thing they're saying in here is that, in theory, if a magical monkey banged out Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets without ever looking at the copy of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, that would not be copyright infringement. So they're saying if it was isolated instances
Okay.
and 2 people created the same
There's
work.
no way that those are isolated.
No, I'm just saying that if they were created as 2 separate works, but if someone created something that was very similar to something else without knowing the other work, that's not copyright. You have to. This article is saying they have to
Prove that
they're
there
not doing a
was
good
some
enough job
connection.
to prove
Prove
that there
there
was
was-
connection
Yeah.
between the 2.
Because you have to provide that proof of evidence. You
Correct.
have to have. You can't just say is that we have to actually have the evidence to prove that it
You have
was.
to prove that they had
actually-
referenced that
No,
music,
I feel like
is what they're
because
saying.
Stairway to Heaven and then Blurred Lines, I don't know the exact release dates, but I'm gonna guess 30 years apart. Like there's no way
But
that you can argue that he wasn't influenced
The thing
by
is,
it.
there
Like,
has to
that's
be
not-
sufficient evidence
certifiable
that
evidence.
that
Yeah.
isn't
No, not-
circumstantial.
Not
Correct.
that he was influenced by it, just if the progression of chords is similar enough to the first song,
But
they can prove
But
it.
if they never knew the other song or had never,
Cannot say that he did not know the
you have
other
to prove
song.
in a
The
court
thing
of
is,
law.
you
You
have to
But you
prove
have to
it.
prove that he
That
didn't
has to be
know in
proved.
order for him to win.
I don't
Yeah.
think that that's part of
argument.
copyright. I don't think that's
No,
part
that's
of
what they're
it's,
saying.
It's with law you have to have proof.
I understand
I
the
know.
idea of proof.
I understand the idea of law.
Are you sure? Because like that's all they're asking for is that there has to be some. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I couldn't do that.
Smack you.
want
If
that
she
monkey,
kills you
that's
on
what I
video,
want.
then like we're not
Okay,
gonna-
moving on then.
We all have feelings. What are your feelings, Internet?
Yes.
Parkland.
Romance.
This is an
Oh,
article about Parkland
tell us.
kids' Rube Goldberg machine illustrates the aftermath of school shootings.
What?
So this
Tell me
is a
more.
video,
Okay.
and it's on YouTube. But this article is from Bing or Bong Bong, Bong Bong. I don't know.
Wow. We are
um,
all top form today.
Anyways, but this is
It's semester.
these kids were challenged with doing a Rube Goldberg machine,
Mhm.
and they made theirs to show the predictable domino effects of responses from politicians and media after every school shooting.
It's a Rube Goldberg machine.
So Rube Goldberg means like cause and effect.
Oh,
So
okay.
like the marble rolls and it
Yes,
causes
yes,
dominoes to
yes.
fall and it causes
Yeah,
scissors
okay,
to cut something.
There's one of those in Port Authority in
Yep.
Jersey.
And
Yeah, I
There's
know
one.
that.
They do one every
Every
year
year.
upstairs.
Did they really?
In the Device Studio.
Oh,
It's really cool.
all right. Shows you
Yeah.
how much I get out.
Yep. Yep.
It's a nice building.
Yeah. David Dover's class is the one that does that.
All right, I will be there to
Venture
witness
that
it
way.
this year.
And
Yeah.
when it succeeds, it's like, yeah!
All right, you're gonna call me next time.
Yeah.
Okay, so then this one shows the aftermath of school shootings.
Of the political and media response after every school shooting, because they're
That's
saying
right.
essentially what it's speaking to is saying that the media and political response is so predictable
Oh,
and
yeah.
so repeatable that you can basically put into a Rube machine and it'll work every time.
The shocking thing. Thoughts and prayers. This is really awful. We should change it.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, the tweets. Oh,
Yep.
That is-
God. That's so dark.
It's so
Yeah.
true.
How
It-
old were these kids that made this machine?
I think this is like a high school that did this.
Oh, that shows you something too.
So yeah, it's actually it's extremely riveting to watch it and to see. It makes you think. It makes you see things in a different way, and brings up the whole conversation of school violence and gun shooting. just
What is
everything.
the media
Everything,
saying?
yeah.
How do people
And-
react to that?
When is there on any issue, but this issue? When is there going to be a definitive? This is what we're going to do to fix it.
Oh,
Because-
true.
Currently, everything that has been happening, in my opinion, it's strange to just my opinion, not supported by CMU,
We're
that
not literally sponsored.
that
If we were, I'd be wearing a CMU shirt.
right,
Getting paid.
but
Go ahead,
that
tell us your
there
thoughts.
needs to be change that needs to happen, and whatever it is, just making forward progress on some form of solution.
Because this
Doing
time-
nothing
Yeah.
means it's going to keep happening,
Oh my God,
and it's
so
just a
many levels of
repeatable
change
rinse
need
and
to
repeat,
happen.
rinse
Yeah.
and repeat.
And it's yeah, and no one wants to try to make the change. They
No
just
one's
want
a-
they
no-
want to tell someone else to make change.
Everybody
They don't want
wants
to
to
try.
Yeah.
No one wants to commit to a form of change,
Mhm.
and that's what the
Which
problem
like the easiest would be like a psychological test,
is.
background, a literal, real
mean,
background check.
I mean,
on-
there's a
No
lot
matter
of
what
things
Before
you
you
can
buy a
try,
weapon or like any of it.
There-
There's so many things.
but nothing's getting implemented. So
And one of those is not giving teachers guns. I'm just
No.
gonna say that
Mhm, mhm.
because that's like after like if you want to do the Rubik's cube, like that was the craziest response from I think a couple of the last ones.
Well,
But
if we arm teachers, then the entire classroom is safer.
no, it's terrifying.
So if you are
Oh my
putting more
God.
guns,
yeah,
and
then just like
do they know
tweeting
how many
hopes and
teachers out there that
prayers.
are like not?
I think back on some of my teachers, I'm like, dear God.
There's some would be like, I guess that'd be okay, but others would be like, oh my goodness, we're all gonna. This is
Also, like, would you really want that responsibility
No.
too? Like, I don't think so.
that's a huge responsibility to put onto a teacher.
I think it was like the last time too, when like it was like hopes and prayers was a tweet, and then people went back on it and was like, how about instead of hopes and prayers, you give this? And it was just like I mean, I love Twitter for these moments, but like just going back and like calling people out on their bullshit and like, how about you just like send some help, or
Yeah.
how about we do something about it and have a conversation?
because these kids, and
Get over the
it
politics.
makes sense. Now they're high
This is a
schoolers.
focus.
Like
Their
this
whole
is,
life has had a high amount of this
yep,
happening.
this is the world that they
Yeah.
have grown up
Yeah.
in.
Anything that we grew up in had nowhere near the amount.
we
of
grew up
God.
with the big terrorism scare.
Yeah.
9/11.
And
That's where
these-
we grew up in.
Yeah.
Was the response to that culture.
Right.
They're growing up in the response to gun violence.
Which is terror. Like
It's-
that is
it's more
terrorism.
It's just
centralized.
a-
It's
it's just a different form.
It's homegrown terrorism.
Yeah.
It's a different form
Right.
of it.
But yeah.
Wow, that's a little depressing.
Taking it to
sad. It's moderately
different
depressing.
yeah,
Mhm.
different
different
thing
type
here.
of thing.
Oh.
Is that this is an article, it's really just a write-up in a report by David Robb on Deadline.com, saying that popular vote shows new IATSE contract is not so popular. And this is an update on it. They
Detail.
won't actually, because it is an
Shocker.
IATSE contract, and this is a public
Mm.
article. We
They
do not
can't
know
say
what the issues are that so many people have confrontations with
it.
in the new contract. But this is saying that the newest film and TV contract was approved last week in a landslide under the union's electoral college style voting system. But if you look at the popular vote, is the closest in union history.
Interesting. I wonder what this contract's about.
Yeah, and that means that the majority, or, you know, the minority of the people out there is a fairly large minority.
Means we need to do away
Right?
with the electoral
I mean-
college in every aspect. Sorry. Go vote.
So
Go vote.
yeah, I mean they're saying like in some areas it was like 47% against, but
Whatever
because
the
it
new
made it
contract is.
57%, then it
Yeah.
went through in the electoral vote. So yeah, it's just interesting to see that there's that much of a division on this contract. That makes me really curious to see what is in this contract that almost half of the people in it do
Were
not want
upset
to.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when
Like, is
when
it
does
one
that
thing or is it
information-
multiple things? We will never know that.
We'll never know that information.
Unless you join IATSE and you work under this contract.
Or
this
if you-
contract.
Well, if anybody is
Or with
under
some-
IATSE and wants to, talk
And
about
not
it,
not
and-
ruin
and-
their.
Yeah, we
And I
won't.
just
We
blank
won't
out their
out you.
names on it.
Yeah, we
Right.
won't out you, but we would
No,
love to know. I
Uh,
would love to
but
know.
yeah,
I
no,
need to
I mean,
know.
it'd be very interesting to see what that was.
Yeah.
And it goes on to actually list out the number of votes and the percentages of which locals hold what percentage. So
And
there's
not-
estimates in here. of
Not for
people.
nothing, but like, if enough people within the union are pissed off about this and decide to go on strike, and like,
What is the
they're
electoral college?
They have
within.
within
in
that.
their
Oh,
organization
okay.
they have an electoral
But I
system
was
so
just
that
saying,
I was-
that essentially New York, who has a much larger base,
Sure.
doesn't have more power because of it's just electoral college is to just balance the power amongst everyone to
Yeah.
try to serve everyone equally.
I was just saying.
And there's one
all-
internally within.
Oh yes.
This
I
shows
was saying
how much
all
I know.
electoral colleges are.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of actually
Outdated,
companies
but-
and unions that have electoral college systems. to balance out.
That makes sense.
But,
This
like,
makes sense.
If enough people are unhappy and decide to walk, and other unions that are like linked with them walk with them, that's gonna be like
Well,
a big.
Here's the thing:
I'm just
is
saying.
in each local, there has to be more than 50% of people in order to actually go on strike.
I know, but I'm saying
Interesting.
if this is enough of an issue, whatever
Yeah.
they wanted to put in it is enough of an issue that half of IATSE is like, no, this isn't okay. I just wonder what that's gonna do on a local level.
I wonder if it has to do with money. 'Cause they have a
It
tax.
depends on the local.
I mean,
But
yeah. I have these you look at everything, you get the logo everywhere. They know each
Mhm.
key, each movie you watch,
Everything in entertainment,
Yeah.
everything. And
professionally,
so,
yes.
And
any
Teamsters are
venues.
like if they walk type of thing, I believe. And like the Teamsters are everything. Teamsters are like people who drive your stuff over the road and like
Oh,
it's
Nothing
such a
moves.
big
backbone. Yeah.
Nothing new
So,
about Teamsters,
if
but-
they piss off enough of IATSE people.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
All right. TBD. To be seen.
right, so I guess we'll find out what happens with that if you're part of IATSE.
Shout us out.
So
We're
in
not on Twitter.
terms of oh my god, we could be though.
It could be.
In terms of thinking back on a process,
Mhm.
whether it be a casting process or I'm just trying to tie everything in,
I know you're trying.
or okay, or
Oh, you got this.
a union agreement ratification process, anything.
Casting.
Harry
Cast-
Potter.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Oh my goodness.
Our
everything.
productions,
Making puppets. All of
oh
it.
god.
Yeah.
the
Taking
podcast.
Technology
The podcast,
out of a rehearsal
Well, they're never
process.
gonna be on Twitter.
Grad school. Wait.
Life.
So,
Life.
how do you get the most out of a post-mortem in theater? By Propaired.com and written by Melissa Johnson. So, a post-mortem, I believe everybody knows, is like after the process, you take the team that worked on the process, you go over what worked,
Self-critique process.
what didn't, right, and like what were you thinking there, and like how did we come to that decision, and like
What do we all feel about this?
Right.
Yeah.
And the writer mentions how in theater it can be a little tricky because unless you're a resident, whatever,
Mhm.
Gone
Like
before the show
we're
even
talking about
closes.
professionally
right? Like it's
versus
hard.
educationally.
Well, but even and we were talking about it today, educationally, it's kind of the same issue where it's like, are you going to work with that specific team again?
True.
And so she gives some tips on how you can still get stuff out of it's not a reason to not do a postmortem. You can still get stuff out of a postmortem if you're not going to be with that same group. And I would argue that I don't think it's necessary to be with that same group. I think you can still learn about why people made that decision and like how you, like in the moment, and how you perceived that decision, and oh, maybe I should look at it from a different way, or maybe next time in a similar situation I should ask about it this way because it wasn't necessarily clear that this is what they meant or this is what they wanted. Like, I don't know.
Everything's a learning experience.
I think it's still really useful. It's very good to focus on like actionable takeaways that you can do for yourself. Like, oh, I should approach it more like this because everyone in the room is saying it came across this way. Maybe I should think about that as a person in any group. And so it's just interesting. Because I don't think it's necessary that it has to be the same group of people.
No.
I think you can totally get stuff out of a postmortem. I think they should happen. I think they should be well run.
I think the biggest downfall to most postmortems is that they are not effectively managed in their process of being a postmortem.
Yeah, or that
So
they
they're
don't
either
feel
not
like a
asking-
safe space.
Yeah, it's not a safe space, or they're not asking the tough questions, or they're not actually getting the result that they need because they're just poorly managed.
Well, and there's also the pressure of like, okay, what if I do work with these people again? Now I've learned the lesson. Is it worth me airing dirty laundry when I've already learned the lesson? And I'm all for constructive criticism, of course, and I think it is great in the grand scheme of things of like, oh, the last time I had a show, we did this, and then we can move forward this way. But I wonder, like, in some of the postmortems I've been present in, you kind of have to weigh, like, is it worth unbagging this?
Well, I also
With
think
a future job you could lose.
Exactly.
there's different levels of postmortem, I think, too, because I know like here we don't, as long as like in technical direction, we don't really do postmortems, but we do stop into the office and say, hey, how am I doing? This, this kind of felt weird, and we talk about the process. At least I do. I can only test what I say or do.
Totally.
But and then like I know during our summer stock where we don't do it for every show, but we do a mid-season and an end of season essentially a post-mortem where we talk about what really worked during the summer, what didn't work, and what we'd like to see happen.
Yeah.
Well, and part of the thing going to that, so we worked at the same summer theater, and honestly, I think what helped make it so that the final, like the post-season mortem, was not like a, well, this happened and you did this, and like it wasn't like a bitch fest, because every single show, after we did 5 shows, every single show we'd like check in with our stage managers throughout the week, and then at the end of the show we would sit down, all of us, and be like, what do you think you did really well? What do you think didn't work? What were some of the group challenges? What were some of the group successes? And like that was really great because nothing built up.
Micro course corrections.
Right, course corrections, but like nothing built up. Like if there was any frustration or anything, you got to say it. It was at most a week and a half old, and then you could talk through it and be done.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't like, I've been holding this in for 3 weeks, like for 3 months, and oh my god, what you did frustrated me.
Well, and there's like you said, micro course corrections. So there's also chances for you to go in and correct it. Whereas like here, the postmortems happen obviously post everything. So what is the correction? What is the lesson learned? How do you move forward from that? It's like, I mean, the costume
How
department.
quickly is it able to be implemented and changed?
Exactly. And like the costume department here, we do postmortems for pretty much everything. And, it's kind of hard because sometimes you want to be honest with your peers. You want to be honest with the process. I'm personally very honest as we go through things, but some people aren't, and some people don't feel comfortable saying things. And other people feel like maybe it's not a safe space. And I've certainly felt like sometimes maybe I shouldn't say things and I should talk privately with people, or, hey, I'm an adult, I can handle this, I can talk to this person directly. Like, what are the cost benefits analysis? Like, I mean, when I worked in like the corporate fashion industry, like we would have reviews every 3 to 7 months to talk about like the performance and again the micro course corrections, which I think are great. But again, what's the safe space? So it goes back to like, how is it being run? How's it structured? What are the end goals of a postmortem? How do you implement those issues that we've talked about into like positive change? Yeah.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're useful. I think they should happen.
I think they're great. I think it's important to also talk about like the process and things, and in a real space and check in. I would love to see it in midway through a show here, and I would love to see it at the end, because I think that would be great to not only just like we talked about last week, not surface checking in with people like, hey, how are you doing? It's like an actual sit down and be like, how are things working? How are things going through the shop? How are you like working on your workload? How is crew going?
Theoretically,
How
that's
is
something that
everything,
advisors, like in our setup, advisors should be doing.
Of course,
Right.
but that falls on the advisor, but it's not a group
Exactly.
conversation.
And that doesn't, like, that's great for your advisor to give you feedback, but that does not take into account, like, your colleagues and who you are working with.
Exactly, because is your
Yeah.
advisor seeing you on the everyday? Are they a part of it? Are they only hearing what you're telling them? There's,
Yeah.
rose-colored glasses everywhere. So it's, trying to have that conversation and be real about it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I got.
Oh, I like
All right,
it.
so that was our 10 articles for the week.
Oh my God, next week's gonna be
Tune
Halloween! Bye.
in next week to see some characters and 10 more articles.
Guys,
Have a great week.